On the village green of Lexington and at the North Bridge in Concord, the first shots of a revolution are fired. A simmering dispute between Great Britain and its American colonies has finally boiled over into bloodshed. The war had begun. At least, in Massachusetts. But what about the rest of America? Would the other colonies rally to support their New England brethren? Or would they shrink back, hoping to avoid a conflict with the most powerful empire on earth? The news traveled by horseback, ship, and rumor, a fire spreading down the continent. And as it arrived in each colony, it triggered a chain reaction that would shatter royal authority and unite a nation in armed defiance. It's the story of how the rest of America reacted to the shot heard round the world. The news hit New York City on April 23, and the city exploded. One observer remembered, this whole city was in a state of alarm. Every face appeared animated with resentment. But not everyone was impressed. The loyalist Judge Thomas Jones disdainfully described what he saw. A mob of Negroes, boys, sailors, and pickpockets, parading the town with drums beating and colors flying. This mob, led by radicals like Isaac Sears and John Lamb, was not just making noise. They marched to the docks and seized supplies destined for the British Army in Boston. They broke into the arsenal at City Hall, liberating hundreds of muskets, bayonets, and over 1,000 pounds of gunpowder. The city descended into what one captain called a state of The people began organizing, forming militias and training openly in the streets. Expecting New York to become a seat of war, many residents, like Peter Vandervoort, began fleeing with their families. By early May, the Royal Lieutenant Governor, Cadwallader Colden, wrote to London with a stunning admission: royal authority in New York had completely evaporated. The people had taken control. The news reached New Jersey on the same day, and the reaction was just as swift. Committees of safety across the colony sprang into action. In Newark, they pledged to risk their lives and fortunes for American liberty. In Morris County, they voted to raise 300 volunteers. In Monmouth County, they began raising funds to buy gunpowder and shot. Recommending every man capable of bearing arms prepare to march at a minute's notice. The royal governor, William Franklin, son of Benjamin Franklin, was utterly powerless. He wrote anxiously to London, describing the militant mood. They are arming themselves, forming into companies and taking uncommon pains to perfect themselves in military discipline. All legal authority and government seems to be drawing to an end here. On April 24, the news arrived in Philadelphia, the heart of the colonies. The city was thrown into what one witness called the greatest ferment, with people animated almost to madness. A military fervor swept through the city, famous for its pacifist Quaker population. The Pennsylvania Gazette reported, "Mars has established his empire in this populous city," predicting they would soon have 4,000 men under arms. Most astonishingly, the Quakers themselves were caught up in the fervor. One observer noted that a considerable number of Friends have joined in the military association. A North Carolina delegate arriving for the Second Continental Congress was amazed. All the Quakers except a few of the old rigid ones have taken up arms. There is not one company without several of these people in it. From Philadelphia to the town of Reading, communities raised companies of infantry, cavalry, and riflemen. The spirit of resistance had even cracked the stone of pacifism. In Delaware, the news inspired immediate action. In the town of Dover, a young man named Thomas Rodney recalled that the inhabitants immediately assembled and unanimously appointed him their captain, forming a military company on the spot. Within weeks, they expected to have 20 companies formed across the small colony. Leadership fell to the county committees. According to Caesar Rodney, the people paid it with more cheerfulness than they have been known to pay any tax. Even with some collection difficulties, the message was clear. Delaware was willing to pay the price for defense. When the news reached Annapolis on April 26, Maryland's royal governor, Robert Eden, lamented that the colony was in a thorough state of confusion. While he hoped a majority remained loyal, delegates passing through Baltimore saw a different story. North Carolina delegate William Caswell described their reception. 4 independent militia companies, with colors flying and drums beating, escorted them into town. The next day, Colonel George Washington reviewed the troops. Maryland's provincial convention reiterated its call to organize the militia, while still expressing a hope for a happy reconciliation. But they made a solemn promise. They pledged to execute whatever measures the Continental Congress adopted, even if it meant declaring independence, should it prove indispensably necessary. The power had shifted from the governor to the Congress. In Virginia, the ground was already primed for explosion. Just days before the news from Massachusetts arrived, the royal governor, Lord Dunmore, had secretly ordered the seizure of the gunpowder from the public magazine in Williamsburg. This act infuriated the colonists. Patrick Henry, who had just a month earlier delivered his famous "Give me liberty or give me death" speech, saw his moment. He argued that abstract taxes didn't move the common person, but this did. Tell them of the robbery of the magazine, and that the next step will be to disarm them. You bring the subject home to their bosoms, and they will be ready to fly to arms to defend themselves. Henry led militia troops toward the capital, ready for a confrontation. Armed conflict was only avoided when Governor Dunmore agreed to pay for the stolen powder. But the trust was broken. Convinced he was in danger, Dunmore fled with his family to a British warship in early June. With his flight, all royal authority in the capital of the largest colony vanished. When word reached North Carolina's capital of New Bern on May 6, Governor Josiah Martin watched as his government became more and more prostrate every day. He saw independent companies forming under my nose. Martin believed he had strong loyalist support in the interior, but he couldn't arm them. And in the capital, his power was gone. Fearing the local committee would seize the cannons on his residence grounds, he had them secretly dismounted from their carriages to make them harder to move. When a committee led by Abner Nash, a man the governor called the principal promoter of sedition, confronted him, Martin lied, claiming the carriages were simply rotten. He later confessed his real motive was to prevent their seizure. Shortly after, like Dunmore in Virginia, Governor Martin fled the capital for the safety of a fort near the coast. With the governor gone, Mecklenburg County, in the western part of the state Martin thought was loyal, took a shocking step. They passed the Mecklenburg Resolves, which effectively declared that all British authority was now annulled and vacated. It was, for all intents and purposes, a unilateral declaration of independence, more than a year before the official one in Philadelphia. In Charleston, the news was met with outrage. The Patriot leader Henry Laurens wrote, "The sword of civil war was drawn." He described the mood in the city. The daily and nightly sound of drums and fifes discover a spirit in the people to make all possible resistance. In a word, the people are resolved to do all in their power. South Carolina's Provincial Congress moved decisively. They authorized the raising of 2 regiments of infantry. Full-time, regular troops, the only ones outside of New England at the time, and a regiment of mounted rangers. They were no longer just a militia, they were building an army. As another leader, William Henry Drayton, wrote in July, "Peace is now not even an idea. A civil war, in my opinion, is absolutely unavoidable." Finally, the news reached Georgia, a colony that had previously been hesitant to join the resistance. The bloodshed in Massachusetts changed everything. As Henry Laurens observed, Georgia is, notwithstanding all of the flattering accounts of Governor James Wright, in commotion. Patriots stormed the public magazine in Savannah and stole all the gunpowder, right under the governor's nose. Governor Wright pleaded for a warship to be sent to restore order. But in a clever act of deception, his letter was intercepted by patriots in Charleston. They replaced it with a forgery claiming everything in Georgia was fine. No help was sent. On July 4, 1775, Georgia's Provincial Congress finally agreed to join the Continental Association. Their measures were mild compared to their neighbors, but the last holdout had finally joined the fold. From the riots of New York City to the quiet determination of Delaware. From the Quaker militias of Philadelphia to the bold resolves of North Carolina. The news of Lexington and Concord was the catalyst. It didn't just provoke outrage, it systematically dismantled the entire structure of British royal government in America. In the span of just a few weeks, 9 colonies had followed New England's lead. Governors were in hiding, arsenals were seized, and armies were being raised. The conflict was no longer a Massachusetts problem. It was an American war.